Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King podcast. This is bonus episode number 20, and I have with me today writer of historical Western and contemporary romance and cozy mysteries, and that would be one Kristine Raymond. Hello, Kristine.
Hi, Lou. How are you today? Thanks for having me on the show.
Not a problem. Glad to have you. You're surviving these social distancing days?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've said I've trained for this my whole life because this is every day for me.
Oh, how so?
Well, because I just like staying at home and doing my own thing and not going out amongst the public. So this is like any other day for me.
Right. I can relate to that because I live in Alberta, Canada, and the winters are pretty harsh here. So social distancing is what we call winter. But
right, exactly.
But now that the weather's warming up, it's getting a little harder. But yeah. So why don't you briefly expand upon the genres that I mentioned that you write in a little bit, and just tell us what you got in your portfolio.
Sure. Well, I started out writing historical Western romance, and that is my Hidden Springs series. And that just seemed the most natural thing to write because I love the Old West. I have since I was a kid. I love romance. I'm a romantic at heart. Mm-hmm. So when I started writing, there was no question at all I was going to do a historical Western. Of course, I didn't intend to write 9 books in the series.
Right.
When I started writing, I thought I'd write 1 book, and then it became 3, and then it became 8, and then it became 9. And you know, as authors, we kind of all know how that goes.
Right.
And in between writing historical Western, I also wrote some contemporary romance just because I sort of hit a point where I was getting a little bit tired of all the research.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of nice to be able to write a book where I could put a cell phone in and not have to say, oh, no, that's a no-no. Mm-hmm. And then after about 5 years of pretty much sticking with the romance genre, I decided that I needed a break. I thought I was going to write a thriller. That's what I intended when I sat down to write Finagled, except it took such a humorous tone that it became a cozy mystery. Ah. So that's pretty much my writing up to date.
Okay.
And that thriller idea is still out there, so that'll happen one of these days. But
okay,
yeah, for right now, I'm entrenched in cozy mysteries.
Okay, so let's delve a little bit into your background then. I'm always curious to find out how writers become writers. Was this a lifelong dream for you? Did you fall into this later, or how did that all come about for you?
I did fall into it later, but it was on a whim. Never thought that I'd become an author. It wasn't a lifelong dream. I didn't spend years writing, filling notebooks full of stories or anything like that. Mm-hmm. In 2013, a friend of mine had self-published a couple of books, and she was telling me about the process. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I haven't written a book before. So, hey, why not? and I sat down Labor Day weekend of 2013 and started writing Here to Stay. Ah. And yeah, once I started writing, it was like I was hooked.
Okay. And that first book that you wrote, was that published?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
self-published. Okay. Yeah, I self-published all my books.
Okay. So I'm curious then, if you started so late in the writing career, were you a voracious reader or a reader at all, or?
Oh, yes. Very voracious reader.
Okay.
My earliest memories are of either reading or being read to.
All right.
So yeah, I've always loved to read. And interestingly enough, when I began writing, I actually read less now.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is I won't read while I'm actually working on a book, because I don't want to be influenced by what another author has written, or even if it's a different genre. Mm-hmm. I just really try not to do any of that. So yeah, I find, and plus I just don't have the time now to read like I used to.
Right. So what genres were you reading in, or what are your favorite authors?
Oh, favorite authors. I love Sandra Brown, Linda Howard, Karen Robards. they write romance and then they moved kind of into romantic suspense. But interestingly enough, they also did start out with that historical Western. So I kind of read what I wrote, at least in the beginning. But I love Dean Koontz, Faye and Jonathan Kellerman. Oh, PJ Tracy. She's just one of my favorites. I absolutely love PJ Tracy.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know. I kind of read a little bit of everything. I'm not really huge into sci-fi or straight out horror. I know Dean Koontz is considered horror, but I've never really reading his stuff. It doesn't come across to me as horror. It's more like a psychological kind of thing.
Right. But, okay.
Yeah.
I have to ask, because it's the name of the podcast, how about Stephen King?
You know, Stephen King, my favorite book of his is The Stand. And it's actually sitting on my nightstand right now, because when this whole pandemic hit, I thought, I need to reread that book.
Right.
I'm no offense, Mr. King, but I'm not a huge fan. But I do like certain books, and I love a couple of his movie adaptations. I love Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, you know, things like that. But I'm trying to think. I liked Carrie Peugeot, because, well, it was about a dog, rabbit or not, anything about an animal, and I'll read it.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, the stand has got to be my favorite.
Okay, that's very cool. And don't worry, we're not going to draw and quarter you if you're not a big Stephen King fan. So there's everybody's got their own thing, and it's taste is all subjective, and that's actually what makes it so great for all us readers, because there's just such a variety of material out there. So
right.
Yeah. So I'm curious now then, because you started so late, it sounds like, without any formal training, like in your education background, did you take any writing courses, or you just dove in head first?
Yeah, I just dove in head first. You know, in high school, I did fairly well in English class. Though I did better in English than I did in math. But I just sat down and started writing, and I've learned a lot. Like, I do not write now the way I wrote 6.5 years ago.
Right. That's what I was going to find out. So what changed for you, or what lessons did you learn writing your first book?
I think more than anything, my style changed, and it's the whole show, don't tell kind of thing.
Right.
I trying to figure out how to phrase it. When I read my first books now, they're not bad. My early books, I should say, they're not bad. The story's good, but the way I told it it kind of sometimes makes me cringe a little bit. It's like,
yeah. Well,
you know, but you learn with each one.
Exactly.
And as I wrote each book, even in the series, I knew to polish it a little bit more, and to not use the same word repetitively, and to expand my sentences and things like that. So, and I think we always keep learning. It's not like you wake up one day and you know everything, and it's like, okay, this is how I'm going to write my books from now on. This is my guidebook, and I'm never going to vary from it. We keep learning as we write.
Absolutely. And your experience, I've heard that from writers who went, a more formal route and whatnot, and they still come back and say, if I knew what I knew now, when I go back to those first books, I'd do them totally different. So that's a process that every writer goes through, I think. So your experience is not just unique to yourself. So you can take comfort in that. Now, writing what you've been writing, it's obvious that what your influences were, because of the genres that you delved into. But as part of your writing process, then, when you wrote your first book, how did you approach that? Did you plot it all out, or did you just write it by the seat of your pants? Did you know where you were going? Your first book, was it a romance, or was it a Western? I can't remember where you started with.
It's a historical Western romance.
Okay,
so it's a romance just set in 1800s.
Okay, so did you have that all plotted out in your head, or you just, because you'd read so many books like that, you kind of knew where you were going?
I just sat down and started writing it.
Wow.
With all of my books, well, and there'll be a caveat to this at the end, but with all of my books, I go into it knowing who my major characters are, what I want kind of the main plot to be, and usually how it's going to end, although it rarely ends the way that I think it's going to when I'm writing it, because I just sit and write and let the characters take me where they want to.
Right.
But aside from all of the rest of it, that just all develops as I'm writing.
Okay.
Now, my caveat is with the cozy mystery, because it's a mystery and I have to pepper in clues.
Right.
I do have to plan that out a little bit more, but I still don't outline. I just think to myself, okay, well, if she's going to get here, then this needs to happen.
Right.
And then I have to figure out where to put those clues so that I don't give things away too early.
Okay. And once you've got your first draft done on that, do you have alpha readers, beta readers? How do you get feedback about your book?
My first draft is actually my finished draft, because I write and I edit as I write. And I wish that I didn't. I've tried not to.
Right.
But it's just, it's how my brain functions. It's how I operate. So by the time I'm writing the last chapter, everything up to that point has been corrected and polished as much as I can get it. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't get checked for punctuation and spelling and grammar. And I don't go, I still go back and I might add a line or take out a line, that kind of thing. But it's pretty solid in terms of what I'm happy with once I'm finished writing it. But yes, I do have beta readers who read it before it gets formatted and all that kind of stuff. And it's amazing because I can run it through different editorial programs. I can read it myself and do read it myself, half a dozen times. And they still come back and they're like, oh, you missed this here or this here or this here. It's like, but I'm thankful. I am so thankful for my team because they give me great feedback, and it's so helpful. For
sure. So when you say you edit, does that mean that whatever you wrote the previous day, you go back through and polish it up before you start writing anew, or how do you do that?
Yes and no. It kind of depends. Usually I edit literally as I write. Okay. So if I'm typing a sentence and I misspell something, I will go back and correct the misspelling. Or if I'm writing a paragraph and the sentences don't sound exactly how I want them. I mean, I've been known to spend, and this isn't an exaggeration, 2 to 3 hours on one paragraph just trying to make it sound the way I want it to sound so that I can go forward.
So what's your typical writing day then?
It varies. It varies on, honestly, how well the characters are cooperating, whether I'm getting that flow.
Right.
If I'm having to struggle to put words on the page, then I'm not very productive at all. I mean, I could write a grocery list with more punch than what I'm putting down on the page.
Right.
So, some days I'm very, very productive and I can sit and I can write for 10 hours and not even blink. And other times I can sit there for 2 hours and get 25 words down that I'm happy with. Right. It really varies. All right. Do
you start in the morning, or what's your best writing time?
I don't really have the best writing time. I am not a very scheduled person.
Oh, okay.
Again, it depends on the book. If I wake up in the morning and I'm really excited about the idea that I have or what I've written the previous day, and I'm just ready to extend that and go on to the next chapter, then I'll get up, I'll feed my dogs, I'll come into my office, and I'll be here until I start getting woozy because I haven't eaten breakfast and it's 1:30.
Okay.
If I get up in the morning and it's like, I'm not feeling it, nothing's there. It might be the afternoon. It might be, I might skip a day. There are times that I skip weeks. I mean, it just really depends.
Right. So that's understandable. And I've always struggled with the advice that you have to write every day, because I just don't know how anybody can be that regimented. I mean, there obviously are people that do that, but if you're not feeling it, I think then it becomes detrimental to the writing process if you try to force it when it's not there. But everybody's different, so it's hard to say.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. That's how I am. I give so much credit to the authors who can sit and write every day. And I've tried that when I haven't been feeling it, and the stuff that I come up with is it's horrible.
Right.
And if I'm not excited about it, my reader's not going to be excited about it.
All right. Absolutely. Curious, your beta readers, how did you procure them?
They are actually readers who were reading my books before I started the whole beta reading, because I didn't put that into place until, I'm thinking, maybe the fourth Hidden Springs book.
Okay.
And they were just, honestly, they're fans that just really loved what I was writing. And I said, hey, I don't really know what a beta reader is. I mean, I went into this completely blind.
Right.
I didn't know what anything was, what any of the terminology was. And they were gracious enough to accept. And yeah, they're a really great group of women. Not that a man wouldn't be welcome on my team, but as of right now, I've only had women accept. But even though they're fans, they don't mind saying to me, hey, this doesn't work, or you goofed up here, and I like that. They don't just tell me what I want to hear.
Sure.
They're honest.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Very good. And you self-publish, right?
I do.
Yes. So before we get into that part of it, I'm just curious, do you have an editor?
No.
No editor. Okay. And
nope.
So you self-publish, and I'm getting the feeling that you do this all by yourself. Am I correct? Do you have anybody doing your book covers, or how does that work for you?
No, I do my book covers too.
Okay.
In the beginning, I did have a cover designer, and we won't go into the history. Let's just say I went through 3 cover designers before I finally got to the point where I said, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. And like the writing, I think they get better as each one goes along. And I absolutely love designing.
Okay.
If I wasn't writing, I think I would be designing.
Okay. Well, that's handy.
Yes. I mean, I absolutely, I love creating the covers.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
So actually the ones on the Hidden Springs series, I remade them from what they were originally.
Okay. Very cool. So I guess at this point, you've probably gone through a fairly hefty evolution from when you started.
Oh, yeah. It's like I'm a completely different person.
Very good.
And in a good way.
Right.
In a good way. But sometimes I look back and think, I never thought that I'd be where I am today back then.
Right.
And then at the other times I kind of think, okay, I wish I knew more than I did, that I do.
Right. Have you taken any formal courses or anything, online courses, or have you joined a writer's group or anything like that?
I'm in a couple of groups on Facebook. I really am an introvert. I'm just,
okay.
I don't mind reading through and getting feedback and reading other people's point of view, but I really try not to get too caught up in it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Because
it really comes down to, just like reviews, it really is that person's opinion. And I'm not saying that they can't offer a constructive opinion as far as, maybe that font doesn't work, or, this passage in the book doesn't work, or things like that. But at the same time, it really is their opinion.
Right.
Again, kind of like to go back to the whole Stephen King thing, just because I'm not really a huge fan of his books doesn't mean he doesn't write great books.
Sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all the craft questions I'll force on you. But I thank you for that, because I do find it very interesting how each writer approaches it and how they evolve as their career moves along. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now let's turn to your writing, or your books itself. Do you want to start with the historical Western? I don't want you to go into all 9 books, but if you can give, are they standalone, or is this a series?
Both.
Okay.
They are a series, but they can be read as standalones.
Sure.
Chronologically, they span 33 years.
Okay.
And they're about a fictional town called Hidden Springs, which is in the 1860s Arizona territory.
Okay.
And each book is about a different member of the town, although they all interact with each other. In fact, the couple that's in book 1, Here to Stay, their daughter is the main character in book 8, Coming Home.
Okay.
So I always like starting with the first book in a series, just because I think you get more out of it as the characters, as they grow and develop, and their backstories and all of that. But readers can pick up a book at any one of the books and just read that story in it in and of itself.
Okay. And each of the stories or each of the books, is it's set in the West? It's the basic genre is romance, or?
Yes, it's romance. They're all romances. They all have a happily ever after.
Okay.
It's just the getting to the happily ever after that is kind of the meat of the stories.
Yeah.
And what makes them historical is the fact that they're set in 1860s Arizona territory.
Are there any plans to revisit?
There aren't, but I have learned to never say never. I do have an idea for another historical Western romance that is unrelated to Hidden Springs, so that's kind of on my periphery.
Okay.
But I think Hidden Springs, excuse me, I just lost my earbud. I think Hidden Springs is pretty well finished.
Okay. And are your fans okay with that, or is there any push from them for more books in that?
I think if I put out more books in Hidden Springs, they would be very happy.
Right.
The thing with that series, though, is, as I said, it spanned 33 years. So the final book takes place in 1900.
Oh, okay.
1899, New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, 1900. So at the turn of the century, it started being less Old West because, more modern technology and things like that were starting to come into play. So I just really don't want to delve into that time period. I like the older West. Okay. The older Old West.
Right. Yeah. The romantic West.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so then you've wrapped up the Western series, and then you moved into contemporary romance. And how many books have you written in that?
I wrote 3 books for the Celebration series, and this hopefully will make my fans happy. I do have plans to write a 4th.
Ah, there you go, fans.
Don't know when. Don't know when yet. And this is the first time I've said that, so you're hearing it here first.
Well, very good.
But that started out as the first book, By Dawn's Early Light, was in an anthology. And then when we got our rights back, I released it on its own. And that was supposed to be a standalone, just the one book.
Okay.
And I have a very enthusiastic fan who is also one of my beta readers. And she pestered me in the nicest of ways for months that she needed more of that town and more of those characters.
Oh, okay.
And I finally caved. And ended up writing Reservations for Two and Under the Mistletoe.
Okay. And they take place in the same town, but different characters in each book?
Correct.
Okay.
Similar to Hidden Springs. There are 3 best friends, and it's about their romantic life. And it's a fictional town called Celebration. Okay. And they're themed around a holiday based on the titles. And then I wrote a contemporary romance called Seasons of Love, which is 4 short stories or shorter stories. They're not full novels. Okay. But each one takes place in a different season. Okay. And those characters also have ties to characters in another story, and that's all in one collection. Okay. So that's one single book. It's just the 4 stories.
Well, it's a good idea because Stephen King used it too for his collection called Different Seasons. So
right.
Yes.
Right.
So it's the same kind of idea.
I think that was the first Stephen King book I ever read was Different Seasons. As soon as you said that, the cover just popped into my head. I think I was like 13 years old. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you realize you just dated yourself. So there you go.
Oh, that's fine. I have no problem with that.
I see also that you have 2 other books, Tempted and Right Words. So
yes,
those one looks like a romance and the other one looks more like a writer type book.
Well, Right Words is nonfiction, but it's not an instruction manual. It's anecdotal about my first year as an indie author. Okay. I just wanted to share some of the things that I'd learned. And again, it's funny to read that now because even what I thought was like, wow, eye-opening back then. Now it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's old news. But it was just fun to see where I was a year later. Right.
So maybe a volume 2 is in the works down the road.
Maybe. I had somebody ask me about that if I was going to do like a 5 or a 10 year, which is too late to do a 5 year, but to do a 10 year. So maybe. Right, yeah. And then Tempted is actually an erotic drama. That was my first foray into erotica. So that's a very different book for me. That is the book that I told my mother not to read. She didn't listen to me, and then I got an earful. So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Just a slight little segue here, because you've written so much romance fiction. Are you part of the? I know there was a big kerfuffle with them, but with the Romance Writers Group of America. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
No. Okay. And Harlequin Romance or anything like that? You never tried to submit to them, or?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Nope.
All right. Well, that's all. We don't have to go any further. I was just curious. And now we're up to your current series, which is the Finagled. Is that Finn's Find?
Finagle's. Yeah, Finagle's the first book, right. And then it's the Finn's Finds mystery series.
Okay.
And that's my cozy mysteries.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is set in what time period?
It's current.
Current?
Yeah. And it's a fictional town called Port New, which is based on the town I grew up in Rhode Island.
Okay.
And it's about Finn Bartusiak, who is a very happy single woman. She owns her own antique store. She has a basset hound. She loves her family. She goes over for, family dinner every Monday night at her grandparents' house, and everything's going along really well for her. And one day, a customer brings in this antique wooden box that she absolutely must have. She knows that he's kind of offering her a deal. It's a little too good to be true, but she ignores the warning bells and buys this box from this guy. And as she's inspecting it, a coded message falls out of the box. And around that time, her high school crush, whom she hasn't seen in 15 years, walks into her shop and asks her out on a date.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, she has a lot going on.
Yes, that's good.
And the plot of the story is that she is trying to decode this message to find out what it is, because she's just naturally curious. And it just gets her into a little bit of trouble and takes her to some places and puts her in jeopardy a little bit. And I'm not going to give the mystery away, but
sure.
It turns out there's also someone else who knows about this code and wants to get his hands on it. And yes, hijinks ensue.
Okay. And as you mentioned earlier, because this was your first mystery, you found the writing process a bit different this time because you had to plant clues and so forth.
Yes, that, and also to not make romance be the forefront of the story, which was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, because there is a little bit of romance in it. Finn has her love interest, Spencer, and so I have that in the book, but I would find myself writing this big romantic scene and then say, nope, pull it back. That's not, this isn't a romance, it's a mystery. And while cozy mystery readers don't mind a little bit of romance, that's not what they're there for. They're there for the mystery. So it was really interesting and a challenge, and a totally different way to write.
And I don't know if you just didn't mention it or whatnot, but are you an Agatha Christie fan too, or because it's a kind of in that wheelhouse, right? Or am I?
Yeah, I mean, she did write. I don't know if nowadays her books would be considered cozy or not. I know there's certain guidelines for all of these genres, and I tend to push those boundaries a little bit. But honestly, I've never read Agatha Christie.
Okay, because I was just thinking maybe it's just because I think of Murder, She Wrote or something like that.
Never seen Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, wow. Well,
no.
So what were your inspirations then? I know you mentioned some authors, but I wasn't familiar with all of them. So was there any of those that wrote cozy mysteries that you mentioned? Or?
I had not read a cozy mystery before I wrote one. I do not know where this came from. It just, again, I thought it was going to be a thriller. And the more I was writing it, Finn just took on this personality and the humor and her quirkiness. And I'm like, this doesn't fit a thriller. This just isn't, that's not what this is. And I thought, it's more like a cozy mystery. So that's what it became.
Okay. And how long's this book been out?
It released in June or July of last year.
Okay. So, and you're coming up to releasing your second book soon then? Or
well, as far as release date, I don't have one yet. I am still working on the second book. It's called Finicky Eaters.
Okay.
My main character is Finn Bartusiak. I may have said that, but that's all of the titles have her name in them.
Okay.
And so yes, I'm currently working on Finicky Eaters. It's being a little finicky. It's living up to its title, so
okay.
It's not coming along as quickly as I'd like it to, but it's there, and it will be out. But yeah, I don't have a release date yet.
Okay. And do you have a plan for how many books in this series?
Right now, I plan it to be open-ended, although I have 6 covers made.
Oh, okay.
So I would like at least 6 to at least show off all of the covers.
Right.
I have about 25 titles.
Oh, okay.
Because I sat down one day and just played on her name and the words. So it's just really going to be open-ended. And I also have plans for another romance series that's anywhere from 5 to 8 books.
Okay.
I mentioned the historical Western. I still want to write the thriller, which is going to be a trilogy. So my ideas abound. It's just whether or not they get from my brain to my fingertips.
Right. Will you be juggling between the series, or are you planning to write the Finn's Finds series straight through and then start something else?
It will most likely be whatever hits me at the moment. That's kind of what happened with Hidden Springs. After I wrote the 4th book, I just really needed a break. And that's when I wrote By Dawn's Early Light, which is contemporary romance. And then I switched back and forth. I can only write 1 book at a time.
Right.
I'm not able to have several manuscripts going at the same time. I would like to get 3 or 4 Finn's Finds books out there. But again, if that historical Western really starts calling to me, that might be what I write after Finicky Eaters, or who knows? I don't know.
All right. Okay. And how about your fans? Have they, that ones that started with you with your Westerns, did they follow you through to the other series as well? Or because they're kind of different. I don't know how much, but readers get loyal to their writers. So maybe you found that they've followed you pretty well, or how's that worked out for you? Okay,
they
cool.
have at least the ones that contact me and ask about new books and give me feedback on the stories. Yeah, I have a devoted fan base, and for that I'm really so incredibly thankful. Thank you, guys.
Well, that's fantastic. That's great. I think that's all the questions I had. So if there's anything else that hasn't come up during the course of the interview, if you want to talk about that, now's your chance.
Well, aside from writing, and this might be why I don't have a whole lot of time to write, I also host one podcast and co-host a second podcast.
Wow.
So my first podcast is called Wordplay with Kristine Raymond, and it launched in October of 2018. I chat with 2 authors a week. In fact, 2 new episodes aired today, Wednesday. That's Wordplay Wednesday. Okay. And yeah, I absolutely love it. I have so much fun. I learned so much. I was able to chat with Sandra Brown, which just absolutely, it blew my mind, because I've been a fan of hers since, again, going back to my teen years. I mean, it was Paige A. Tracy, another one of my favorite authors. She's been on the show a couple of times. So I mean, honestly, I'm name dropping here, but I really totally love all of my guests. I mean, people ask me all the time, who was your favorite guest? And I can't tell them because they all are. It's such a fun show, and I love doing it. And then about a month ago, I began co-hosting a podcast that airs on YouTube. It's called The Felonious Scribe. And I co-host with author Dawn Hosmer, and we chat about the dark and twisty side of writing.
Oh, okay.
Because she writes psychological.
Okay.
So we have a lot of fun with that.
Okay, cool. So that one's on YouTube, and the other one, I assume, is on all the podcast catchers, whatnot.
Yeah, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. It's on Artist First Radio Network. It's pretty much everywhere. Okay,
and your books are available, as you mentioned, on Amazon and part of the Amazon Kindle program.
No, they're not on. They're not on KU Kindle Unlimited. Nope, they're available wide, so you can get them on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Google Play, iBooks, Kobo. Anywhere that you can find an ebook. Okay, and do you do signed copies? I do, but I don't actually have any paperbacks on hand right now. Right. Yeah. Usually, the signed copies would be if I attended an author event. Right. And occasionally, I do them as I'll do a giveaway or a promotion or something.
Sure.
But as of right now, I don't have any on hand.
Okay. If there's any questions or whatnot, or if people want to get on your newsletter, they just can go to your website and sign up there?
That's right. The best way to find me is to go to my website. It's www.KristineRaymond.com, and that is Kristine with a K.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sign up for my newsletter. You can listen to episodes of the podcast. You can watch episodes of the Felonious Scribe. You can find links to all of my books. Pretty much, it's a one-stop shop. Everything is there. I'm also active mostly on Facebook as far as social media.
Mm-hmm.
I am on Twitter, but I don't do much over there.
Okay, very good. I think that wraps it up then. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Great. I was sweating a little bit because I saw that you were a fellow podcaster, and wondered, well, she's probably going to be judging me how good I am against her, but
absolutely not. I judge no one.
Well, that's very good. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and once again, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Yes, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And to everybody else out there, remember, stay safe, but stay scared.